Hello, good evening and welcome to Newsfirst Review 360. I'm Nadim Majid. Let's get on with the program. A day after Donald Trump triumphed at the US presidential election and shocked Democrats, the world and yours truly, Sri Lankans were glued to their TV screens to see what Budget 2017 had in store for them. Here's a look at a snapshot of the budget.
In a move to cut expenses and generate state revenue, budget proposals for 2017 included revisions to corporate and withholding taxes aimed at reducing the fiscal deficit to 4.6% of GDP from this year's 5.4%. The standardized corporate tax, which was at 28%, will now have three levels of 14%, 28% and 40%. The government aims to boost the 2017 tax revenue by 27% to 1.82 trillion rupees year on year. The government expects to cut the deficit to 3.5% of GDP by 2020 while increasing direct taxes. The Finance Minister Ravi Karunanayake said a 10% capital gain tax will be introduced from April 1st, 2017, which is expected to add 5 billion rupees into the treasury. The government has encouraged the use of electric cars by proposing to reduce excise duty and offering an interest rate subsidy on loans to buy vehicles. The government will charge minimum tax of 2,500 rupees for traffic offences and a carbon tax from vehicle owners. The government will also charge a tax of 5 rupees for every 10,000 rupee transaction made by banks and financial institutions. The Sri Lankan companies investing in the North, East and Ua regions will be allowed high capital allowances of 200%. Government to allow import of CTC tea produced on the cut tear curl method for export. Sri Lankan plantation firms to be limited to 5,000 acres.
The Finance Minister has done an excellent job in giving a budget where the cost of living has been addressed by prices of essential commodities coming down, and there has been a major investment in education. Big emphasis on science and technology. Nanotechnology Institute, COSTI, the ITI, and for research in science and technology there has been money. So there is a shift, not just into hard infrastructure but into soft infrastructure.
I see this budget as a people-friendly stimulus budget. All sectors have been looked at, and I believe that this budget will take the economy forward. And also, with regard to eradication of poverty, I think this would be a great stimulus. And also, when you look at the education sector and that every child will have an insurance policy, that's a burden of every household. And I think education being given priority in this budget will definitely create a major stimulus. And also, the incentives given for investment and also for foreign companies to come and set up here. Sri Lanka needs FDI, and I think this is the way forward.
The direction is right. The right type of incentive structures seem to be in place. It is very realistic because I think he appreciates the fact that it is the public sector and the private sector together. If they work together, we could meet the challenges ahead. So it is very interesting in that sense how he has brought in crucial incentive mechanisms together, sort of linking incentives together.
For the health, this is the highest budget this year, 2017. It is more than any of the years. So this is the highest. And we have achieved the 3% of the GDP, what we have promised in the elections. Because this year's the health budget is 3.11 of the GDP.
Last year they presented a budget which changed thrice. And also at the last stage of the year, they introduced the VAT again. So now what we see is in this budget also there is no 6% given for education or 3% for health. So there is no consistency or there is no program to take this country forward.
We'll have some perspective on the 2017 budget with a top economist coming up later on in the program. But in the meantime, how will US President-elect Donald Trump's leadership affect developing countries, specifically in the areas of trade and investment? Let's have a look. I'm joined by Shiran Fernando, lead economist at Frontier Research. We're going to be talking about Trump. Shiran, that victory of Donald Trump, definitely not what the pundits predicted, not even in Sri Lanka. What does this mean for countries like Sri Lanka, developing countries, specifically in the area of investment and trade?
I think the election as a whole is a good message to governments all over the world that post the global financial crisis, you have not actually seen a lot of wealth being created. So you've seen booms in financial markets, people doing quite well. For example, with Brexit, it was a London versus the rest kind of vote. And you're seeing something, if you look at the trends in the US election as well, of those who have done better in financial markets or those who are more educated, knowing that or voting more towards the opposing candidate, and others who shared this message of what Trump had, believing in him and believing in that the change was sort of required. So I think the message is quite clear in that sense. And what investments all over the world or investments in Sri Lanka or things like that should actually focus is on wealth creation, on job creation, because the people always will have the power to vote in and vote out governments. And you consistently need to have your economic policies geared towards creating this wealth without, increasing the income disparity.
Sharon, one of the things we saw at this election was that the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, was a major feature of on both campaign stages, from Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, and then it spilled over into Hillary Clinton's campaign as well. Now, the TPP with Trump's election, he's promised not to sign it. He's promised not to move forward on TPP. What does this mean for Sri Lanka as a trading nation, Sri Lanka's prospects, and also prospects for any trade agreement with the United States of America?
So I think one thing that will be quite important is to how Trump will transition from campaign mode to presidential mode, and whether the things that he said in terms of taking out NAFTA or relooking at it or taking out the TPP, whether he'll actually, as President Trump, will he actually look into this. So I think that transition is very important. So before jumping the gun and analyzing a lot of what he said, we'll need to look at it. But I think the message is clear in terms of America, that they want to sort of bring back manufacturing back to US. So that's sort of puts a bit of concern. So I think more than the trade deals and things like that, and the concern over that, I think his attitude or his management of China, for example, will be more critical, because if, for example, he labels them as a currency manipulator or accuses them of other things that he has previously said in the campaign as president, then it will have a lot of impact in terms of demand and sentiment, and that could have a pass-through impact on Sri Lanka, because if the demand from China goods sort of reduce, and that is because of weakening demand from the US or things like that. So from those policies, then Sri Lankan exports will be weak, because because our exports are so, our export products are limited to certain markets. We can't afford to have more demand drops. But I think the other agreements that we are looking at in terms of India, in terms of Singapore, Turkey, I think we sort of have to surge on with that while monitoring TPP in the background as well.
Something that has been constantly said by political commentators in the United States about Trump is that there isn't any real policy consistency in his message. Trump has taken, as the comedians put it, literally every stand possible on every issue possible. So, given that, do you think we see any real change in the US's economic and trade policies?
So I think what will be critical is, for example, the Republican has the control of the House as well as the Senate, as well as you have Republican president. So whether the Republicans actually in the Senate and Congress will be for him, because in the campaign you saw a lot of people not being for him or even endorsing him. So if you were to see all of them in the same line, then you could see some sort of concrete change. But I don't think, as the president alone, he'll be able to do a lot of change, because that's what a lot of people expected from Obama as well. And though he was able to deliver on a lot of things, because of where the Congress and Senate stood, he was not able to pass a lot of things. So it shows even Obama, with this whole message of change, was not able to get a lot of things that maybe could have been done with the help of the Senate and Congress done. So there I think lies where the balance of power will head towards. But I think there will be incremental changes, and markets will react based on what he says in the next few days and how the transition goes on. And I think that will give you a more sense of where he stands on certain topics rather than what he said on the campaign, because I think fundamentally I'm expecting both to be a bit different from campaign.
Thank you very much, Shiran. So at the end of the day, the message is, it's Trump. You never really know what he might do next. 8 years ago, no one really thought that he would be President of the United States of America, but here he is, President-elect. What will he do? Will Trump the President be any different from Trump the reality TV star, or Trump the presidential candidate, or Trump the successful businessman? The central bank is forecasting that growth will accelerate to 6.3% in 2017, backed mainly by Chinese investment.
In a pre-budget assessment of the economy, the central bank said that economic growth is estimated to accelerate to 6.3% in 2017 from around 5.5% in 2016, helped by booming tourism, information technology and logistics industries, as well as Chinese investments. The higher growth potential is envisaged to be achieved mainly through productivity improvements supported by the adoption of new technology across production sectors, according to the central bank re-budget assessment report. According to the central bank, the proposed Colombo International Financial City, formerly known as the Port City, and investments in Hambantota by China and projects in the western megapolis region would drive economic growth in the medium term.
Coming up on the other side of this break, a top economist shares his thoughts on the 2017 budget. Welcome back to the program. On the eve of the budget speech, Finance Minister Ravi Karunanayake promised to deliver a development-oriented budget that will address the anomalies of all previous budgets. Has he delivered on this promise? I had a chat with Anushka Vijayasinghe, the chief economist at the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, for some perspective. So Anushka, let me ask you straight off the bat, what were the highlights of Budget 2017?
So the highlights for me was that even firstly starting from the introduction of that the finance minister gave, it had a lot of the same phrases and tones that that the prime minister in the prime minister's economic policy statement of last year and the recent one we had last week as well. So a lot of similarities in the tone, the moving towards an export and FDI driven economy, focusing on the middle class, growing the middle class, but also focus on the rural economy. So that for me was one takeaway, and it was different in tone. That opening was different in tone to his opening last year. Then moving on, there was a very noticeable big chunk on primary industries, and I think that's a politically smart move to do. Talking a lot about new initiatives in agriculture, in animal husbandry, and in poultry and dairy and so on. So that was, I think, a clever move. And zooming forward towards the end, another big takeaway was that he rushed through a lot of the tax proposals section, which is often, for me, the most interesting part of a budget, because at the end of the day, a budget is about taxing and spending. So what were those revenue proposals? So we had to wait till after the budget speech to look at the document.
And now with the budget proposals, something that we heard was that the government is going to be focused on increasing direct taxation to 40% and indirect to 60% of revenue from the current 80-20 or little more than 80, little less than 20. But we didn't really hear any steps in this budget that are taking us there, are we?
Well, that 60-40 split, when the Prime Minister first announced it was looking forward towards, the end of this decade, trying to get to that. But you're right, last year we didn't see much of a move at all to get towards that, and that budget was just weeks after the Prime Minister's statement. This budget, I felt, went a little closer towards that. You can see more direct tax measures, removal of some exemptions, and so on. So trying to get towards that, but we have to remember, yes, direct to indirect matters, but even within indirect, is it taxes like VAT which hurt poorer people more, or other indirect taxes which are not strict income taxes, so taxes on wealth and so on. So I think we're seeing it moving in that direction, but we're not completely there. And it's unreasonable to expect us to completely flip that ratio on its head. We did see some measures to increase corporate tax revenue, withholding tax was changed, some exemptions, increases in taxes on, for instance, exporters. So trying to rebalance that towards more direct taxation.
Anushka, also on the subject of taxes, we saw there were some environment proposals that were made in order to conserve the environment and sustainability at the core. From the point of view of taxes, you were talking about taxes like VAT impacting the poorest segments. Do you think that Sri Lanka is ready for something like a carbon tax?
So we saw that was a very interesting proposal. For the first time, Sri Lanka might introduce a carbon tax. Now, it's been debated around the world. Some argue that it hurts enterprises, it's an additional burden. Others say it's a good way of getting people to price the cost of carbon emissions and the damage you do to the environment. For me, the key is how will it be designed? Will it be designed in a way that genuinely encourages people to make other choices? But it has to come alongside other alternatives. So you can't just tax motor vehicles and not improve public transport.
Anushka, finally, can I ask you, were there any negatives, if any, on Budget 2017?
So I think it's too early to really see whether there are negatives. Let me put it this way. There are parts of the budget that I think need clarity. For instance, we heard a proposal around limiting the acreage for regional plantation companies. Now, how is that going to work? Is that going to discourage them from diversifying? I don't know the implementation of that. Capital gains tax, again, it talks about implementing it by the 1st of April at a 10% rate, but we don't know the implementation around that. I mentioned earlier about the focus on primary industries. Now, for me also, I would like to see whether that's more towards protecting domestic industry, selecting certain enterprises and industries unduly, or whether it'll genuinely be support measures to encourage competitive domestic industry. So it shouldn't be unduly protective and protectionist. So I think these are things that we will see in the next few days when the finance minister speaks at various forums. We'll get more clarity on. But of course, one big thing is implementation. And last year we saw a lot of stuff that didn't get implemented, and that's the big question mark this year hanging over this budget. Regardless of all the positives and negatives, it is how much of this stuff will get implemented.
So there you have it, the thoughts of Anushka Vijayasinghe, the Chief Economist at the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. At the end of the day, it's all about implementation. If it doesn't get implemented, then it really is pointless. When we come back, we have the pulse of the business community on Budget 2017. Welcome back to the program. Tonight on our segment Speak Your Mind, we feature the voices of the business community on the 2017 budget.
The budget gives a very interesting perspective for what we have been talking for some time. The Finance Minister acknowledged the fact that the maritime industry contributes less than 2.5% for the Sri Lankan GDP, which is a recognition that we are far behind of targets what we want to be, and this is something that we recently discussed very much at the Colombo International Maritime Conference. So in that sense, the government is planning to open up the sector for more investments as far as we read it. And also we can see that the logistics industry of the country is also being recognized as a key factor. In fact, the minister again highlights the need of developing the hub concept and expanding regional logistics in Sri Lanka. So also we saw the focus on cruise tourism, developing a specified cruise terminal at the Bandaranaike Quay at the Colombo port, and also we saw Minister mentioning about reducing or removing certain tariff items from the multi-country consolidators who are bringing in containers to Sri Lanka for regional distribution. Given that, we see that the focus is quite high on the maritime sector, and we appreciate the fact that the government is going to do some policy and reform changes in this sense, and we will now have to see how they would go along doing the modernization, because in particularly a maritime authority was also mentioned, which is somewhat a model that Singapore operates, which means the Sri Lankan port authority system will be probably moving in towards a much awaited landlord model, which will bring in more private investment and efficiency to the system, which is a necessity for the Sri Lankan shipping industry to grow if we are to be a hub.
Budget is the development oriented and export centric budget, no doubt about it, and we are really going towards the digital economy. And on our part, we requested few things from the government which have been accepted. Number one, revisiting the exchange management system which have been accepted, revisiting custom ordinance and introducing the electronic documentation which have been accepted, and also connecting all the players in the system like the BOI and all things that have been accepted. Right, on an apparel specific basis, we requested that we need to go to the lagging region, right, and they accepted the regions as Ruhr, Northern and Eastern province, and various incentives are given, and also capital formation not to be taxed, that also been accepted. Then coming back to the one other area is that we have been having a lot of problems with our LCL cargo, and we have given a proposal how to resolve this, and that also have been accepted.
Is Sri Lanka ready for upmarket luxury cruise tourism? Let's hop on board Genting Dreams, a cruise ship designed for the Asian cruise market.
Genting Dream, believed to be the first ever Asian luxury cruise line, arrived at the Colombo port for the first time as part of her relocation voyage. The vessel, which was built in Germany, began her epic ocean voyage to Asia via Gibraltar, through the Mediterranean Sea and the Suez Canal, and finally crossing the Indian Ocean to visit Sri Lanka, India, Singapore and Vietnam.
We believe the growth and the momentum of the cruise market in Asia is just beginning, and it's an emerging market, and we've seen double-digit growth not only in the demand but also the supply. And we appreciate our competition because it makes us stronger, but we're very proud to be here with you today to actually take that first step as bringing the largest ship to Colombo. And we hope that that encourages the industry and our other cruise ships to come here as well.
Equipped to carry 3,400 guests and 2,000 crew members, Genting Dream has guest rooms with private balconies, over 35 restaurants and bars, swimming pools, spas, beauty salons and fitness centers.
It is a pleasure for me to welcome the vessel Genting Dream on an inaugural voyage to Port of Colombo. We also note with gratitude that the Dream Cruises Lines had chosen Colombo as a port of call in the delivery voyage of this vessel, with about 1,900 disembarking passengers and 1,500 embarking passengers. The number of disembarking and embarking passengers most probably could be the highest within recent history of Port of Colombo. I am sure that the Dream Cruises will have a most positive entry to Sri Lanka based on the current status on the tourist industry. It is a fact that the number of passenger vessels calls to Port of Colombo had been on the increase, and the government will look into improving the facilities to accommodate an additional influx. Sri Lanka is very positive on the concept of being a maritime hub due to the two main reasons. The Port of Colombo is located very close to the major shipping line, and Sri Lanka is an island.
And that's a wrap of tonight's program. Don't forget to look us up on Facebook. You'll find us at BizFirst Review 360. That's first with one S2. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week.